this tutorial, I'll be covering the numeric and the smoothing feature. First of all, let's go to the Create tab, and we're going to select a box. Basically, all you have to do is hit N, and it brings up the numeric panel. And as you can see, it creates a box in the center of each screen, and you've got the top view, the perspective view, and let's move this out of the way. I don't want to slide. And this is the right view, and this is the back view. And if you're familiar with the X, Y, and Z coordinate system, you can follow along. If not, I'm going to give you a quick overview of it. If you look in the perspective window, you notice the Z-axis is running along this direction and X is in this direction. Now, in order to use the numeric feature, don't hit enter to commit to it, because it becomes not available. You can only do this when you first create the primitive. So just to give you an idea of how this works, if you look at the width in the numeric panel, you can actually change the size of the box by either selecting the arrow there and drag it to the left or the right, and it stretches it out, or it actually makes it taller. But I'm going to leave this at 1. And if you move the center X, Y, or Z, it moves the position of the object in the workspace. So if you move the Y, it brings it up and down, and if you move the X, it moves it from side to side in X. But I'm going to put all these back at 0 because I want it in the center of the workspace. If you ever use symmetry, it allows you to move both sides by moving one side. Okay, if you look down at the bottom of it where it says segments, you can change the segments of the object in X, Y, or Z. And Z. Okay. And that's how it works using a box. Okay, now let's use a ball. If you notice, Lightwave Modeler works in layers too, kind of like Photoshop, but you don't visually see the layers, but you see the boxes in the upper right hand corner. So I'm going to select layer 2, create ball, and hit the N key for numeric, and it brings up a ball, and the same rule applies here. Don't commit, and you can change the size that you have, which if you move it to the right, it increases the geometry. If you move it to the left, it reduces the geometry. So I would try to use as less geometry as possible, because less geometry allows you to render a lot faster. I'm going to zoom in on this. And let's move the geometry again so you can really see what it's doing. If you notice, I'm going up the scale, up to 26, and I'm going to move it back down to about 10. And be careful with this, because you don't want the polygon count too low, because the smoothing isn't going to work well with the real low polygon count. So it's just a matter of kind of playing with it a little bit to get the best results. Let's see. Let's hit the tab key, and that'll smooth it a little bit. I can actually turn the smoothing on in Modeler. But first of all, let's go to the surface editor, and let's change the name of this object here. You can rename it by hitting the rename item, or you can use the Q key on the keyboard. Let's call this ball. And you can actually change the color here too. So let's stay with the standard kind of a light gray color. And we're going to send it to layout. And let's zoom in on it. Now when you send this to layout, you can bring up the surface editor in layout also. Make sure that the ball is selected and turn on smoothing. If you notice, it smooths out the polygons. Now the number pad on the keyboard, it allows you to change the views. If I hit the number 6, it puts it in the camera mode, and that's where I want to work, just to kind of show you what the smoothing looks like after you render it. So I'll go down to the bottom here and select camera, and if you take your mouse, click and then push forward, it brings the camera closer to the object. And if you right click, you can raise it up or down, or you can move it to the right or left. Also, you can use the number 3, which gives you the side view. I'm going to move the surface editor out of the way, and I'll zoom out on the camera using the zoom tool, and you can actually move the camera closer, or you can move it down. I'm going to move it as close as possible. So now let's hit 6 on the number pad. Let's hit F9 to render. Well, right now I can't hit F9 because I'm recording the screen. So we can select it under the Render tab and Render Frame. And select Continue, and as you can see, all the polygons are smoothed out. Okay, now let's go back to Modeler. And let's try one more. Here, let's delete this. Select layer 1. Okay, let's use the spline draw tool. Just create a simple object here. If you notice down in the position window down the bottom left hand corner, X is at 0, so I'm going to start my point there, and I'm just going to draw just a simple object, a vase. I'm not going to draw the inside of it. Just draw 1/2 of it, and I'm going to use the lathe tool to create the vase. Okay, so if I wanted to add more geometry, just select the numeric tool, and you can do this when you first create the object. So if I slide it to the right, it adds more geometry, but I still have to manipulate these little handles here when you add geometry, because it disfigures what you've just drawn. So and I'll commit to that. Now I want to show you just one other item here. Because this point isn't dead center, when you create a lathe from a spline, you want to make sure that your center point is dead on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to center that by just selecting the V key on the keyboard, and in the x-axis, looking in the back window, just select, make sure the value is set to 0, and just select OK, and it puts that point dead on the center line. And whenever you're using the lathe tool, make sure that that's dead center. And let's select in the gray area to deselect that, and let's grab the lathe tool. Under the multiply tab, let's select lathe, and there's something I want to point out. Now if you notice, you can see this in the perspective window, what it's going to look like. So put your lathe tool on the center point of the x-axis, make sure it's 0, click, hold down and drag. Well, now you can hold down the control key to lock it in place. Now notice in the perspective window everything looks inside out. So you want to make sure that you move the lathe tool in the right direction so your geometry isn't flipped inside out. So I draw the lathe tool down. Now let's drag it up. And there you go. So just a little tip there to keep you from having to go back and flip the geometry. Now, just suppose you committed to that and the geometry was flipped inside out. Just select a few polygons and hit the right bracket key again and hit the F key to flip the geometry. And there you go. And if you want to smooth it, just hit the tab key. Let's send this to layout so I can show you what this will look like, because you can still see some polygons if you zoom in on it in Modeler. But if you go to layout, that's where everything is going to be finalized at. So let's send this object to layout and let's see what it looks like. Let's move this out of the way and let's move the camera because we're actually in the camera view. Well, let's use the number 3 key again and select the camera and select the camera and move. Let's move this up. Okay, now you can actually tilt the camera just by moving the middle wheel on your mouse, and you can point it down and then rotate it back to move the camera up. And you can also move the lights. But let's go into the camera mode. Now let's open up the surface editor. Again, I want to show you how to change the name because this object is still identified as a ball. So let's go to surface editor and you can see the ball is already selected. Just select rename and I'm going to call this vase. And if you wanted to change the color of it, just basically click there. Let's change it to a green vase, I guess. And this is where the final render is going to be rendered. So you can change the glossiness of it. You can dim the lights and all of that. We won't cover that in this tutorial. And let's select render frame and hit continue, and there your vase. Now one other thing, let's see if we can make that any smoother by selecting the surface editor again, and under that let's increase the smoothing. And this was already turned on when it was a ball, so when it was named a ball. So let's move that out of the way and render frame again. And if you notice the slight pixelization in the image itself, that's dependent upon the kind of camera or the anti-aliasing that's set on your camera. Let's go down and select the camera property. Let's select the camera first and then select properties. And let's turn the anti-aliasing up, let's say 7. Let's exit out of this and let's do a render again. Alrighty, select continue, and if you notice the pixelization is gone, and that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and send me some feedback to let me know if these videos are helpful. Hopefully in the future I can create more to help those that are interested in learning Lightwave 3D.